The curse of the old mine. Well, folks, I see you're still here after my first two stories. You're braver than most. But this one's different. It didn't happen to me, but to a close friend of mine, Jack. And let me tell you, Jack wasn't the kind of man to spin tales. What he told me has stuck with me ever since. By the time I'm done, you might think twice about wandering near abandoned mines. Jack worked as a miner back in the day, out in the coal fields of West Virginia. Tough work, dangerous too. Cave-ins, gas leaks, equipment failures. Plenty of ways to die down there. But Jack always said the scariest part wasn't the work. It was the feeling like the earth was hiding something it didn't want you to find. There was one mine, though, that even the toughest miners didn't like to talk about. They called it Dark Hollow. It had been shut down in the 1930s after a series of collapses killed more than 20 men. One of the bodies, a man named Willie Grayson, was never recovered. The locals said his spirit still roamed the tunnels, trapped in the dark. Years later, in the 1970s, a new company decided to reopen the mine, promised a fortune in untapped coal. Jack was one of the guys hired to go back in, and from the very first day, he said something felt wrong. The air was heavy, like it didn't belong in your lungs. The deeper you went, the more you felt it, like someone was watching you. One night, Jack and three other guys stayed late to finish a job deep in the mine. They were in one of the oldest tunnels, so narrow the walls seemed to press in on you. That's when they heard it. A tapping sound. Faint at first, but steady. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more taps. That's a distress signal, one of the guys said. They figured it might be someone lost or in trouble, so they decided to follow the sound. The deeper they went, the louder it got. But Jack said something didn't feel right. He started to notice shadows on the walls where there shouldn't have been any. He swore he could hear faint whispers in between the tapping. And then they found it. A wooden door. Now you might be thinking, what's a door doing in the middle of a coal mine? That's exactly what they thought too. The door was old with deep scratches carved into it like someone or something had tried to claw their way through. One of the guys, Henry, made a joke about it being the gateway to hell. Nobody laughed. Against their better judgment, they decided to open it. Henry grabbed a crowbar and broke the rusty lock. The moment that door creaked open, a cold, damp wind rushed out like the mine was breathing, and then they heard it. A voice, soft but clear, turn back. Of course they didn't listen, they stepped inside. The tunnel beyond was narrower and darker than anything they'd seen before. Their flashlights barely seemed to cut through the black, and that's when they saw them. Bare footprints on the dusty floor, fresh ones. Henry led the way, holding the light, when suddenly his flashlight went out. Darkness swallowed them whole, and then they heard it, a scream. Not a normal scream, but one that Jack said sounded like pure terror, like someone who'd seen something so awful their mind just broke. They ran. Jack said it felt like the walls were closing in on them, like the whole mine wanted them gone. When they finally made it back to the surface, Henry wasn't with them. They searched for days, but there was no trace of him. It was like he'd been erased. A few weeks later, the company shut the mine down again. Too dangerous, they said, but Jack wanted one last look. He went back to the entrance, and there, sitting in the dirt, was Henry's old mining lamp. And here's the part that gets me every time. The lamp was still lit, faint but steady, like it had been burning ever since that night. So that's the story Jack told me. Maybe he made some of it up, maybe he didn't. But after everything I've seen in my life, I tend to believe him. And if you ever find yourself near an old, abandoned mine, just remember, not everything buried underground stays there. The Christmas Visitor. Well, folks, I see the holiday spirit's alive and well out here tonight. But let me tell you, not all Christmas stories end with joy and cheer. No, sir. Some are darker than a lump of coal. You want a scary story? One that'll make you think twice about the holiday season? I got just the one for you. It's a true story, or at least that's what I was told. Happened not far from here not too long ago. Now, I don't claim to have seen it myself, but the man who told me was no liar. His name was Tom, a tough old logger from up north. He swore on his life that what happened to him that Christmas Eve was real. So gather close and I'll tell you what he told me. Tom lived alone, deep in the woods of northern Maine. After his wife passed and his kids moved away, he didn't much care for people. He said the woods were quieter, safer, a place where he could hear himself think. He had a little cabin, rustic but cozy, and a dog named Rusty, the best companion a man could ask for. It was Christmas Eve, and a storm was rolling in. Snow fell heavy, blanketing the forest in silence. Tom didn't mind. He was used to the isolation. He built a fire, poured himself a glass of bourbon, and settled in his chair by the window. Rusty lay by the hearth, snoring softly. Around 10 o'clock, just as Tom was dozing off, Rusty jolted awake. His ears perked, and he let out a low growl. "What is it, boy?" Tom asked, but Rusty didn't move. His eyes were locked on the door. At first, Tom thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Now, Tom wasn't expecting company. Who'd be out here in the middle of a snowstorm on Christmas Eve? He grabbed his shotgun from the corner and went to the door. "Who's there?" he called. No answer, just the sound of the wind howling through the trees. But then he noticed something. Footprints in the snow, leading right up to his porch. They were strange, though. Barefoot, no boots, no shoes, just bare human feet, and they weren't walking in from the road, they came straight out of the woods. Tom's gut told him to lock the door and stay inside, but curiosity got the better of him. He opened the door just a crack and called out into the storm. "If you need help, you'd better speak up." Still nothing, just snow and silence. He shut the door and locked it tight, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Rusty, meanwhile, hadn't moved from his spot, his growl now a constant rumble. A few hours later, Tom was in bed trying to sleep when he heard it again. Knock, knock. This time it was louder, more insistent. He grabbed the shotgun and headed back to the door, but when he got there, he froze. The footprints were back, but now there were more of them, circling the cabin like someone or something had been pacing around in the snow. And here's the thing, they didn't lead away. Tom didn't open the door this time. He knew better. Instead, he shouted, "Whoever you are, I've got a gun, and I'm not afraid to use it." The knocking stopped, but then he heard something worse. A voice, low, raspy, and not quite human. It said, "Let me in, Tom. It's Christmas. Let me in." Tom's blood ran cold. How did it know his name? He didn't wait to find out. He shoved a chair under the doorknob, stoked the fire, and sat in his chair, shotgun in hand. Rusty was whimpering now, pressed against his leg. Hours passed, the storm raged on, and the knocking came and went, always in sets of 3. Tom didn't sleep a wink. When dawn finally broke, the storm had passed. Tom cracked the door open, shotgun ready, and looked outside. The footprints were gone, like they'd never been there. But there on the porch was a single object, a wreath made of twisted branches with something red tangled in it. At first he thought it was berries, but when he looked closer, he saw it wasn't. It was strands of human hair knotted together like a warning. Tom didn't stick around to find out what it meant. He packed up his things, grabbed Rusty, and left the cabin that very day. He never went back. Some say it was just a drifter, someone who got lost in the storm. But Tom didn't believe that. He said the voice wasn't human, and the thing at his door wasn't a man. He called it the Christmas visitor, and to his dying day, he warned people. If you hear knocking on Christmas Eve, no matter how cold or dark it is outside, don't open the door. Not for anyone. So there you have it. Believe it or don't, but keep this in mind. Christmas isn't always about joy and laughter. Sometimes it's about what we let in, whether it's the holiday spirit or something far worse. The Secret of Shadow Lake. It was a long time ago, back when I was young, strong, and full of foolish curiosity. Must have been about 40 years now. I was working as a forest ranger deep in the wilderness of Maine. The kind of place where the trees are thick, the towns are scarce, and the silence, well, it's louder than you'd expect. One evening, my partner, Old Jim, told me about a place the locals called Shadow Lake. It was so deep in the woods it didn't even show up on maps. People around there didn't like talking about it, almost like they were afraid the name itself would summon something dark. Now, I was never one to shy away from a good mystery, and maybe I was a little too cocky for my own good back then. So when Jim said, "Best leave that place alone, Edgar. You're young, got your whole life ahead of you. Some secrets ain't worth uncovering," I should have listened, but I didn't. One crisp autumn evening, with the moon hanging low like a slice of overripe orange, I packed my flashlight, a canteen, my old hunting knife, and my trusty journal. I set out to find the lake. The deeper I went into the forest, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind, not even the rustle of leaves, just nothing. It took me 3 days to find it. Shadow Lake. It wasn't like any lake I'd ever seen. The water was black, smooth as glass, reflecting every single star in the sky. But it wasn't the stillness that got to me. It was the feeling, like something or someone was watching me. I swear, as I stood on the shore, I felt eyes on me, dozens of them. I decided to camp there overnight. I thought maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks. I built a fire, tried to write in my journal, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. And then things got strange. Around midnight, just as the fire was dying down, I heard them. Voices, whispering, quiet at first, like the wind through the trees. But it wasn't the wind. These whispers knew my name. Edgar, Edgar, I grabbed my knife and spun around, but there was nothing, just shadows. The whispers got louder, closer, and then silence. A silence so thick it pressed against my ears, and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the lake, waist deep in that black water. She didn't move, didn't say a word, just stared at me with these glowing white eyes. My blood ran cold. I shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" But she didn't answer. All I heard was a whisper, soft and clear. "You found me, Edgar. Now I'll always be with you." I ran. God help me, I ran like I've never run before. I didn't stop, didn't look back. By the time I collapsed, the sun was rising and I realized I was lost. No food, no water, no sense of direction. But you know what scared me more than the thought of dying out there? The thought that she was still following me. On the third day, a ranger found me wandering, half delirious. He brought me back to town, but when I got home, I noticed something that sent a chill right through me. There, on my front porch, was a small puddle of black water. It's been 40 years since that night, but I still can't sleep easy. She's always in my dreams, standing in that water, staring at me. And every time I wake up, I hear that same whisper, "You found me, Edgar. I'll always be with you." So that's my story. Call it what you will, a warning, a tale, a load of old nonsense. But let me tell you this. If you ever find yourself deep in the woods and you hear someone whispering your name, don't answer. Just run.